Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast, IDP edition. I'm your host, John Macri, fantasy analyst here at PFF. And we made it, folks. If you're listening or watching this episode, it more than likely means you made it to a fantasy championship, which, first off, congratulations. That is fantastic. Nice job by all of you. And secondly, it means that we need to keep our foot on the gas, make sure we leave no stone unturned in order to help you secure that fantasy championship. So I had to bring back one of my favorites to help you do it all. And to help me as well. So from the IDP show, the great Jace Abbey is back. Jace, hope you had a happy Christmas, happy holidays. Welcome back, man. How you been?
Really good, John. Really good. A great Christmas. Loads of family. Yeah, just threw myself into it. Feeling a bit frazzled now, but excited to be talking some football with you. Thanks for having me back on again. Love it.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I'm excited. Fantasy Championship week really kind of snuck up on us here. I think a little bit. It's with the Christmas holidays and things like that. It Wednesday basically came very fast for me. So prepping everything, cramming everything, trying to get everything in, but we got it ready. We got all the stuff that we're going to talk about set. We're going to go game by game as usual. We're going to put the timestamps in the episode description as well, so people could find the games that they're looking for. And we'll do our usual thing. We're going to cover the main storylines for each team, focus on our favorite, least favorite matchup, stuff like that. We got the matchup-based visuals for the YouTube crowd. And yeah, happy to answer the start sit questions in the comment section as well. I'll link to my IDP rankings in the episode description. I will link to the PFF IDP fantasy report. It has been delayed. It is usually out on Tuesday. A huge apology to everybody that's been waiting. Unfortunately, just with the Christmas holidays, again, everything got kind of backlogged. So that will not be out until Thursday. So again, I'm really sorry about that. And hopefully people will still get the information they need from that in time. But it will be out on the website shortly after you listen to this. So I appreciate everybody's patience with that. And again, sorry for the delay, but again, fantasy championship week. So we're going to get into it here in just a second. Right after we give a quick shout out to our presenting sponsor, Fabric by Gerber Life. As a parent, you've had to learn so many new skills to provide for your family, how to do copious amounts of laundry, meal plan for even the pickiest eater, and now how to protect your family's financial future. Fabric by Gerber Life provides an easy one-stop shop to for your family's financial needs, offering high-quality term life insurance policies plus other financial solutions in one easy online hub. Fabric was designed by parents for parents to help you get a high-quality, surprisingly affordable term life insurance policy in less than 10 minutes. Fabric has flexible policies that fit your family and your budget with quality policies like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. Get your personalized quote in just minutes and then apply when it's convenient for you. It's all online and on your schedule. You can go from start to covered in less than 10 minutes with no health exam required. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/fantasy. That's meetfabric.com/fantasy. MEET fabric.com/fantasy. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company. Not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. All right, Jace, let's get it started here. And we'll start with Thursday Night Football, where we have been blessed with a game between the New York Jets, once again in prime time, going against the Cleveland Browns. So where do you want to start with these two teams?
Yeah, my first talking point here has got to be CJ Mosley. So he's had a really poor month compared to what he was doing earlier in the year. Everyone's got a bit tired of him not delivering in the way that we were seeing again in those first sort of 12 games. But I think this is the week he can rebound, and I think he will against the Browns. They're giving up a huge amount of tackles to opposition linebackers, number one in the league in that sense. I think for those that aren't already too tired of what Mosley hasn't been doing and those that have kind of stuck with him and remained faithful, this is when you get your reward, as long as his lack of production in the last 4 weeks hasn't cost you a path toward the fantasy championship. So Mosley is, I think, primed for a big rebound this week.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I have him as LB1 this week, just to kind of make a statement here that like this is the week for CJ Mosley. It is, like you said, I agree. It's a bounce back week for him. He's still one of the most efficient tackling linebackers in the NFL, and just a beautiful matchup here.
For sure. Number 2, Quinnen Williams. Can we rely on him this week? I think so. He has 9 fewer sacks than he had at this point last year, but the pressure rate and the pressure numbers are higher than in 2022. And he's been getting kind of hot again down the second half of the stretch of the season. It's not a terrible matchup for pass rushers, for those Jets pass rushers. Browns have been a little bit stingy in the last 3 games, but yeah, I think Williams can continue to deliver for us this week for those in DT required leagues, and even for those that start three down linemen, 3 defensive linemen. So yeah, start Williams. I think he's probably going to continue his hot run.
Yeah, love Quinnen Williams. Like you said, like a lot of his underlying pass rush metrics have actually been better than what they were even last season, right? It's just been the sack totals. And we've talked about that all season with him, where, the sacks are coming and this and that. And it's been definitely very slow. Like he had a half sack in week 15, 1 sack before that, nothing last week. So there's definitely room for him to kind of build on it. I mean, we're running out of time, obviously, but yeah, it's just hard to sit him when he's been so good. And there's definitely a nice tackle floor there as well going against the Browns, like you said. So, love me some Quinnen Williams for sure.
Yeah. Main talking point for the Browns has got to be Myles Garrett. There's this kind of the sentiment still that he's kind of gone quiet following that injury. I don't think that's the case. He's just been unlucky not to finish. He leads all edge rushers in pressures over the last 3 weeks. He's just not finishing. This week, I think against that Jets offensive line, it's going to be a big week for him. I think the pressure numbers, as I say, they've always been there, or they have been for the last 3 weeks. I think they're going to be there again this week, and I think he's going to get home with a sack as well.
Yeah, I feel like he has to, right? Like you said, hasn't had a sack in a few weeks now. But again, just continues to be, I think he's the highest graded pass rusher in the league this season, 94.6 pass rush grade, which is insane numbers. And now going against Carter Warren and Mekhi Becton. Carter Warren has one of the worst pass blocking grades in the league. Mekhi Becton has allowed the most sacks in the league. This is like a really nice matchup here. It's Trevor Siemian at quarterback as well. It looks like Zach Wilson already ruled out. So Siemian probably a little bit better at avoiding sacks than Zach Wilson, but not. I don't think it's going to matter too much when Myles Garrett is on a bit of a slump here and looking to kind of break that slump against a really weak opponent. So I'm with you. Yeah, Myles Garrett's edge 1 for me this week. I think it could be a multi-sack game for him.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. And my last point I wanted to bring up was JOK. So his snap share has been tumbling a little bit in the last couple of weeks, but he's still been one of the best performers at linebacker over the course of the last month, depending on your scoring, of course. But yeah, right up there. So can we still trust him? Question for you, John. I think we still can. I don't think it's fallen away. His snap share's fallen away to the point where I'm struggling to rank him amongst my top sort of 36 linebackers, but what's your take on this? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't mind JOK. I have him in that kind of LB3 range, which is, I mean, a bit higher than where he's been previously earlier in the year, because there's at least been some consistency as far as his defensive snaps go. Like the past 4 weeks prior to last week, he was averaging 90% of the team's defensive snaps, right? And then it did drop down to, I think, 72% this past week, which has been normal with the Browns linebackers, right? Like we see this kind of fluctuation from them all the time. It's a weird thing that it dropped last week though, because I think it was Kevin Stefanski was talking about how, he's ready for an every down role and this and that, and literally played the lowest snap share of the past 5 weeks by a pretty significant margin, which, it just tells you, how much to trust in coach speak and things like that. But I don't mind JOK this week. It's not, an amazing line matchup by any means, but it's not bad either, right? So I think if you're using him in that kind of LB3 range, I think that's a fine spot for him.
Yep. So that's the main talking points, I think, for the Jets and Browns.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, I am with you. I don't think I have much more other than that. Should be, I mean, Zadarius Smith, again, you're looking for streamers. He's been more deserving of sacks this year as well, just hasn't got home, but he did have 2 sacks last week. But to the same extent that we like Myles Garrett, Zadarius Smith could have that potential as well. But other than that, on the Jets, it's kind of the usual suspects here that we like. No real standout matchups. We like CJ Mosley and Quinnen Williams as well. All right, let's go on to the Detroit Lions at the Dallas Cowboys. And I mean, let's start with the Lions here, and maybe start with the linebacker position, because so the Cowboys are below average as far as giving up tackles per game to the linebacker position. They're 19th in that regard. So it's not the best matchup for these guys, Alex Anzalone and Jack Campbell and Derek Barnes. So Derek Barnes did miss last week, which gave Jack Campbell his highest snap share, 85% since week 7. It wasn't his most productive game, obviously. I think he only had 4 tackles in that one. So if Derek Barnes misses this week again, which I don't know, it doesn't seem like it's overly likely, but he is questionable, so you never know. Then there's at least room for Jack Campbell to play some snaps there. I don't love him too much. Like he'd move up from where he is. Like he's LB 50 for me right now, but only because I have Derek Barnes in there as well. He would move up to probably that kind of LB 3 or 4 range, like not too much higher. Just again, it's not a great matchup. It's not going to be a full-time role. So for people that are excited about Jack Campbell, I know people want to get him into starting lineups. This isn't necessarily the week to do it, but could be usable in those deeper leagues, basically, if Derek Barnes is out, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's still Anzalone all the way. Didn't have in fact, had one of his quietest weeks last week of the whole season, but yeah, it's that second spot behind him that's the more interesting of the two. And like you say, I haven't got Campbell ranked amongst my top 50. He'd be just outside, alongside guys like Josie Jewell, other guys that are going to, I think, see that sort of 70 to 85% snap share this week.
Yeah. Makes sense. And then the other things with the Lions, I mean, we know about Aiden Hutchinson. He's been solid, but not delivering huge sack numbers or anything like that. So the other stars of the defense, at least last week, were the safeties. Ifeatu Melifonwu, Kirby Joseph, both of these guys had huge games, multiple interceptions, sacks in there as well. So I mean, they're definitely startable. I don't know if you're expecting that kind of high level of production that we've got from them this past week. But again, these are players that people are probably adding off waiver wires, and they are playing 100% snaps. So you do like that about them. And it's a decent matchup here against Dallas, who's given up the 7th most tackles per game to the safety position. So if you're looking to kind of build off that Ifeatu Melifonwu or Kirby Joseph momentum, then you could definitely start them here this week. Brian Branch is another one coming off a huge game. Had a sack, an interception, a forced fumble, 6 tackles. But again, his role just continues to be limited to that kind of rotational nickel corner. Doesn't look like he'll be playing a full-time role, which makes him just a riskier kind of boom-bust IDP start each week, right? For those considering it. And we've talked about it the past couple of weeks now, but he's essentially only playing when the offense is in 11 personnel, when there's 3 wide receivers on the field. When there's anything other than that, he's kind of coming off and getting some rest and not a part of the defense. So Dallas is a below average team in 11 personnel. They use a lot more 12, 21 personnel as well. So he just continues to be a riskier start, but he definitely has that big play potential, obviously, what we've seen, but there is definitely a lower floor there with the limited snaps.
Yeah, I made a similar note about him, boom or bust, based on that snap share, but most of his points, or a lot of his points, come in by way of big plays, and whether or not he can keep those going against Dallas, it's not something I'd want to invest too heavily in terms of my starting lineup this week.
Yeah, it's definitely
love him as a player, but
yeah, it's just the defense. The defense has been a little bit tricky to figure out, right? Especially at the linebacker position, and now a little bit with the corner here, Brian Branch. So just if you're willing to risk it this week, I mean, you can. It's a decent matchup for corners. Dallas giving up the 6th most tackles per game to the cornerback position, but again, just know that it does come with that high risk of a lower floor. And then on the Dallas side of things, I mean, nothing too interesting here other than the linebackers. The linebacker usage this past week, I think, was pretty concerning. Despite like decent production for them, I just don't know that they'll be easy to trust here in week 6 or week 17. Both of these guys kind of hovered around like the 50% snap range, which was way below what they've been at, an 80, 90%. And this has been very similar to the Cleveland Browns linebackers. It's just been fluctuation all year long in the usage and the snaps for these guys. So again, going into this week, if you're willing to risk it, you can. I know Marquise Bell specifically has the safety designation, so you may want to take advantage of that cheat code there. But again, if he's going to be playing around 50% of snaps, there's definitely other safeties that are full-time that I'd rather trust. So not sure how you're feeling about the Dallas linebackers heading into this week, but they're pretty much an avoid for me right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's no teams on a bye right now. Yeah, the position's been hit pretty hard by injury, but there's a lot of guys out there that are stepping up to replace those who have been injured. Too many for me to want to go out and start guys that are playing half the snaps. Bell had a productive week last week, but by and large, these two guys haven't been super productive despite playing sort of that 80, 90% snap share most weeks. So I'm not super interested in starting either of these two guys. And I'm also a little bit worried about starting. Obviously, Donovan Wilson was one of the main beneficiaries last week. Yeah. Played 100% of the snaps after not doing so for most of the season. So yeah, I'm concerned that they'll either move back to what they were doing before or find like some sort of halfway house between the two, and all three guys could lose out. So yeah, I think at DB, where you've got loads of choice, I'm avoiding Wilson, even though he had a full-time role, and at linebacker, just scared off by what they did last week. Could have been a game plan specific thing, but I'm not risking it.
Yeah, and we've seen it too many times already this season with the safeties here, with the linebackers in Dallas, right? So, yeah, I'm with you. Donovan Wilson's like safe. He's in the safety 3 range for me. As much as I like him as a player, if I knew he was guaranteed a 100% snap role and he was going to continue to get those box snaps and everything like that, I'd like him a little bit more. But again, there's no guarantee for a full-time role here, and there's definitely risk that it's going to be like 70 or 70%, something like that, which it's been multiple times this season. So definitely something to be concerned about if you are starting them. But knowing that it is at least a decent matchup for the safeties, because the Lions are giving up the 3rd most tackles to the position. So there's that at least. Anything else for Dallas or Detroit for you? I mean, Micah Parsons, we don't really need to talk about Micah Parsons, even though people are probably wondering, if we would talk about, you're starting Micah Parsons. There's nothing else to say there. Anybody else for you?
No, nothing else. Nothing else I want to talk about on that game.
Awesome. All right, let's move to the New England Patriots at the Buffalo Bills. Where do you want to start with these two teams?
Got to start with Christian Barmore, I think, haven't we? Yeah. After that week last week, he was, one of his best career game in 3 seasons or 2.5 seasons, if we count the injury he had last year. 3 sacks, it was just massive. He's been really good all year. In fact, I think he's been really good since he stepped into the league. Had like 50 or more pressures in his rookie season at a position that's really hard for guys to master. The sacks haven't always been quite there. This season's been the exception, though. So his pressure rate is really good again. His win rate's pretty decent as well. But the sacks are there, and that's really the main difference in terms of what he's doing. So yeah, I'm a big Barmore fan. Can he repeat? Almost certainly not. It was such a big week that expecting anything similar is going to be setting ourselves up for failure. And it's a tough offensive line. It's a pretty tough offensive line. So yeah, temper expectations for Barmore. Great to see. He is a good player. Don't expect the same.
Yeah, that's kind of the concern for me this week as well, going against the Bills, who are a good pass blocking unit. Josh Allen's really good at avoiding sacks as well. One of the best in the league, actually probably the best in the league right now as far as like pressure to sack conversion rate goes. But yeah, Barmore, I love Barmore. We've talked about him in off seasons past, right? About him having this pass rush potential, and he's definitely had the underlying metrics to back it up and everything like that, but hasn't really had the sacks. But yeah, 8.5 sacks this year, leads the Patriots. Obviously a 3-sack game last week is definitely going to help that, but yeah, not expecting that level of return this week. So I got him as like DT 20. He's definitely startable in those deeper leagues, 2 two D tackle leagues. But yeah, not high expectations this week going against the Bills and Josh Allen. So love to see it for Barmore. Hopefully it continues. Hopefully the playing time remains steady there under Bill Belichick, and we could start to trust him a little more going forward. But anybody else for the Patriots for you?
Yeah, I had the two safeties ranked pretty highly. So Duggar and Peppers were ranked in the 20s, the early 20s for me. So sort of, end of LB2 sort of territory. Peppers, though, the hamstring didn't practice on Wednesday. So we're kind of, are we looking at pivoting to Jalen Mills? It's not something that kind of fills me with excitement, but he's the guy that seems to be the first one up to replace Peppers when he missed time last weekend. So yeah, that's something to keep an eye on because it is a good matchup for those safeties, and I do like both Duggar and Peppers if they're playing. But if you're struggling, yeah, you could have a look at Mills. But again, this is a position where you've got a lot of options. So don't reach, don't take a gamble.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's fantasy championship week, and Jalen Mills could be in a nice spot here if Jabril Peppers doesn't play, but it's also New England. It's Bill Belichick. We've seen him give him a heavy role, but we could also see him play the guy for a half and then yank him and not put him back out there for the rest of the game, right? So yeah, Kyle Duggar feels like the one to trust the most for me as well. And yeah, like the matchup this week. The Bills giving up the fifth most tackles per game to the safety position. So love that for Kyle Duggar. Definitely a startable option for me this week. And then yeah, Peppers, we'll see if he if he gets some practice time in leading into the weekend, if he's going to play, but I don't mind Jabril Peppers, and he's got a cornerback designation on RSO as well. So kind of a nice little option there to potentially put in a cheat code. So yeah, don't mind him.
Yeah. That's pretty sweet. And then the last thing on the Patriots was Josh Uche. Can we trust him? Great game last week, but he's still ranked third in snap share for the Patriots edge rushers. So I'm just a little. He's like a poor man's Bryce Huff for me in general. His pressure rates are always quite up there, but his role has always been quite small. And it remains so. So I think there's better options out there in terms of a safer weekly floor. So I'm passing on him where possible, unless I'm absolutely desperate, which is just not the case. And then on the Bills, Ed Oliver, a nice matchup for him. I think that the interior of that Patriots O-line is really poor in pass protection. So I like what he could do for us this week. And then final point, can we trust Terrell Bernard? He hasn't had more than 5 solos in the last 5 games. Yeah. Middling matchup here. Will he even be fully healthy? He kind of returned to the game versus the Chargers after leaving for a short while, and he's kind of downplayed that injury, but he is listed as questionable, and that could be, I think, for those fantasy managers out there that have got 2 guys ranked very similarly at the position, a deciding factor. So those are the talking points from me. Any thoughts on Ed Oliver or Terrell Bernard, John?
Yeah, no, love Ed Oliver. I really like that call. He's been excellent this year, and it's a good matchup here against New England, who again not a great pass blocking unit there. You got Bailey Zappi at quarterback, so there's definitely potential there for Ed Oliver. Even like Gregory Rousseau, Leonard Floyd. Like this is a nice matchup for those guys. They're going against there's a left tackle for the Patriots because Trent Brown is been getting some weird usage. There's something going on there. He might not be fully healthy. Didn't practice on Wednesday. I'm gonna pull up the name of the Patriots left tackle who might be filling in for him because it sounds like almost like a Game of Thrones character here. Vidarian Lowe. That's so Vidarian Lowe, has a 32.3 pass blocking grade, which is 85th among 85 qualifying offensive tackles this season. So look, Gregory Rousseau, Leonard Floyd, these aren't the most amazing pass rushers in the NFL, but looking for streaming options, if you really need it in those deeper leagues, this could be a nice spot to kind of take advantage of them. Both those guys play each side of the line, so they switch from drive to drive and things like that. So there's potential there to kind of work against a Vidarian Lowe and Bailey Zappi at quarterback. So I don't mind those guys either. And then, yeah, like you said, Terrell Bernard, he's like low end LB2 for me. He's been good, really good all year. And just the past month really has definitely declined as far as production goes. And we even saw Tyrell Dodson's 80% snap share last week, which with the highest for him since like week 9. So not a full-time player by any means, but he's been productive, could be taking away a little bit of that production from Terrell Bernard. So yeah, Terrell Bernard, low end LB2 at best for me. And then Tyrell Dodson, the 80% is right now looks like an outlier. I don't know how much to trust it if it's going to continue this week, but he's an option for deeper leagues, basically.
It's interesting. The Dodson, he's played really well. I think when he's got opportunities, he can't tackle very well. But other than that, he's played pretty well. So I'm not surprised to see him get more of a run. But yeah, let's wait and see how this pans out. It's Bernard, I think, till the end of the year.
Yeah, I am with you. But I think that's pretty much it from New England Buffalo, unless you got anything else for those guys.
No, that's me. That's me out on those two.
Awesome. Let's go to Carolina and Jacksonville then. I'll start with the Carolina linebacker. I was going to say linebackers, but it is really just one. It's Frankie Louvu, right? And he's coming off a nice IDP performance this past week. 6 tackles, nothing crazy, but he also had a sack in there. He's now got 5.5 sacks on the season, which is just a half sack behind Brian Burns for most on the team. So he's been productive. He's found ways to, be an effective IDP as well. And it's a really nice matchup this week going against the Jaguars, who are giving up the second most tackles per game to the linebacker position. Luvu's been about league average as far as tackle efficiency goes. So he's had his down games in there for sure, but I really like the matchup this week for Frankie Louvu. He's LB 11 for me this week. I think there's a lot of potential there. I don't know that Trevor Lawrence is going to play. So again, if they're going to use him as a blitzer every once in a while as well, he should be able to get home against a less mobile CJ Beathard at quarterback as well. So don't mind Frankie Louvu this week, basically.
Yeah, you're a bit higher than me on him. I've got him in the 20s. But yeah, I can get on board with your points. Maybe I'm scared off by that tackle efficiency being sort of, as you say, pretty average. But he has that upside, that ability to have a big week, and could be a deciding factor in those in that fantasy championship for teams that start him. So.
Yeah, I think he has the kind of upside, like you said. There's definitely been those down games for him, but it definitely pop off every once in a while, and I kind of like that spot for him this week here against Jacksonville. But I mean, other than that, for Carolina, for me, like Von Bell is just kind of fine at safety. It's a decent matchup for cornerbacks for Carolina here, because Jacksonville's given up a lot of tackles per game to the cornerback position, but they don't really have anybody that's reliable. JC Horn is playing the most snaps basically, and he's not a great IDP either. So it's really, I think, Frankie Louvu. I mean, Brian Burns, I know he doesn't have the sack production this year, but he's been fine. He's been a solid pass rusher. And Derek Brown at defensive tackle, who's also been solid. Obviously, he's just a tackle monster this year, and just continuing to add to his totals. Should be up over 100, definitely by the season's end, if he's not already there already. I haven't checked this week. I can't remember. But he's very, very close. So yeah, that's kind of the Carolina Panthers for me. I don't know. Is there anybody else for you that's worth talking about?
No, just to touch on the Brian Burns point. Yeah, he has been okay, but that was more toward the beginning of the season. I've dropped him quite significantly in my rankings over the last couple of weeks, because it seems like he hasn't done anything for quite a while now. So he's dropped right down for me.
Yeah,
and it tells its own story that we almost mentioned him as an afterthought. He would have been one of the first people we would have mentioned on that Panthers defense from an IDP standpoint, going back 2 months ago.
Yeah, it's just been like, as much as people are excited about Brian Burns and his potential and everything, he just hasn't taken that next step quite yet in the NFL. Like all his pass rush numbers really good, just kind of plateaued over the past few years, and there hasn't been that any kind of sign that he's going to be that elite pass rusher, even though it feels like he will, but still young, 25 years old. But Yeah, it's not the worst matchup this week for him against what's his face here, Anton Harrison. So Anton Harrison, 57.3 pass blocking grade. It's not terrible. It's not very good either. So it could be one of those weeks for Brian Burns. It's been a while for him since he's been IDP relevant, but yeah, he's not been exciting. You're not excited to put him in the lineup and hope for the best because he just hasn't shown it this year. On the Jacksonville side of things, I like the regular guys, basically. This is not a lot of questions here for me. Foye Oluokun, Devin Lloyd, both been solid. It's not a great matchup going against Carolina, who are giving up the 30th most tackles per game to the linebacker position, but these guys have been solid for most of the season here. Same thing with Rayshawn Jenkins at safety. The Panthers are giving up the 8th most tackles per game to the safety position. So I do like Rayshawn Jenkins quite a bit. He's been a productive tackler. Nice matchup for Darius Williams at corner. He's actually CB10 for me this week because the Panthers given up the 2nd most tackles per game to the cornerback position. And Josh Allen. I mean, what else is there to say? Josh Allen's been excellent. I know he's been a little bit quieter here lately. But again, the pass rush metrics are all there for him. And the Panthers love to give up a lot of pressure. And Bryce Young giving up quite a few sacks. So that part of it I really like for Josh Allen. But that is basically nothing really changes here for the Jaguars defense for me.
No, I wanted to rank. I know it's, as you said, bad matchup for the linebackers. I wanted to rank Foye lower than I did, but I couldn't drop him any more than LB3.
Yeah,
he's just too. No player's matchup proof, but if there was one, he's got to come fairly close to being one of those guys, I think.
Yeah, that's exactly where I have him as well. I have him as LB3. It's just like you said, he's just been so good. Let's go to the Los Angeles Rams at the New York Giants. Where do you want to start with these two guys?
Yeah, Kobe Turner. I think he's looked pretty good over the last month. I didn't want to believe it. No, it's not that I didn't want to believe it. It's just that I was a bit slow on the uptake, maybe. But he's been pretty consistent over the course of the last month. I'm always a bit wary of these guys who come out of nowhere and start to put it all together in 1, maybe 2 games, but after 3 or 4, maybe 5, I'm starting to believe what I'm seeing. There's another guy we'll talk about later on, Malcolm Kuntz, that falls into the same category for me. But yeah, I think Turner can continue his hot streak against the team that has allowed the most sacks in 2023.
Yeah, it's a terrible offensive line over there in New York, and this is funny because we literally have the same ideas here with these players. That Kobe Turner is definitely the one that I highlighted as well, because since week 12 and since the Rams week 16 game, Kobe Turner owns a 90.1 pass rush grade, which is the best mark for the position over that span. So the best mark among defensive tackles, Kobe Turner has been amazing since week 12 here. 5.5 sacks over his last 7 games, 6.5 on the year, which is tied for the lead among rookies this season. So really nice numbers there for Kobe Turner. Love the matchup. Love it for him and Aaron Donald as well, who been quiet recently, right? Only a half sack across his last 6 games or something like that. So this Giants interior offensive line especially have been really, really bad. So I think there's at least a chance here we see a nice Aaron Donald game and potentially a nice Kobe Turner game as well.
Yeah, all 3 of those guys on the interior, isn't it? It's Bredesen, Pugh, and Schmitz Jr., isn't it? They're all really poor pass blockers. So yeah, Donald and Turner, I like both this week. Ernest Jones, he's a slight fade for me this week in a poor matchup. Still a low end LB1. Wouldn't hold it against you, John, if you had him in LB2 territory though. Where do you have him ranked this week?
Yep, low end LB1 for me this week. Exactly like you said. I just love Ernest Jones. I love what he brings to the table. I love the defense that he plays in here. But like you said, it's not a great matchup, right? So the Giants, that offense, what they're going to look like and how much opportunities they're going to provide, it just seems to change week to week. And now they got to change their quarterback as well with Tyrod Taylor starting this week. So it should be better than Tommy DeVito, but we don't know, right? It's been so bad over there.
Yeah. And then on the other side, Thibodeau, I want to start talking about him first of all. He's inconsistent. He has been all year. His production's come in bunches. I don't think we can trust him versus a team that has allowed only 1.9 sacks per game this year. I think they rank fifth as I look at it on this list here. Don't like Thibodeau this week. Bad matchup.
Yeah, we talked about him last week and not trusting him and not wanting to play him against the Eagles, right? Because his pass rush metrics were really, really bad this season, and they just continue to be. Like his win rate, his pressure rate, his pass rush grade, everything like outside the top 50, even though he has whatever it is, 11 and a half sacks on the year, like he's taken advantage of some good matchups, right? And he's had these explosion games, but really he's definitely overperforming what he's actually doing on the field. And I'm with you. I don't love Kayvon Thibodeau. He's right back where I had him last week. Basically, he's in that low end edge 3 range against a good Rams team that were with Matthew Stafford, who's able to get the ball out and avoid those sacks. So I'm with you. I just don't think he's done enough as far as pass rush metrics go to kind of earn a starting spot or be a must start here going forward.
No. Bobby Okereke, I think he can kind of produce. It's a bit of a below average matchup, but I've still got him as LB6, quite high, I know, but he's been pretty consistent this year. I kind of like him.
We have him in the exact same spot. That's so funny. This happens every time we do a show together. Yeah, there's literally the exact same rankings almost. That's so funny. But yeah, LB6 for me as well. He's been the one guy, like, you know, when you look at some of these kind of man-heavy defenses, and a lot of the linebackers kind of underperform and they're inefficient. Bobby Okereke's been excellent. He's been able to kind of overcome that situation and just be consistent for pretty much every week here. So yeah, I love that about him. And yeah, I like the safeties as well. How do you feel about those guys?
Yeah, I was going to mention the corners actually. Let's give the corners a bit of love. It's a great matchup for these Giants corners. Deontay Banks is probably the guy I would normally go with, but he's questionable, I think, with a shoulder injury. So just a suggestion for managers out there who are looking for corners to start or who have Banks on their roster, just to monitor his status as the week unfolds.
Yeah, he's a nice one for sure. Definitely gets targeted a ton when he's out there. So yeah, I like Deontay Banks. But yeah, and I do like the safeties, just kind of to build on that. These guys, nice matchup here. 9th most tackles per game to the safety position from the Rams. So Xavier McKinney, Jason Pinnock, coming off decent weeks here again in a positive matchup last week as well. So I like them to kind of keep that going here in week 17 and have both of those guys in that kind of high end safety 2 to low end safety 2 range, with McKinney being the highest.
Yeah, I think I've got the same, pretty similar. I've got McKinney above Pinnock. Pinnock's down for me at safety 22. McKinney's at safety 10 this week. Nice.
Yeah, I got McKinney safety 15 and Pinnock safety 23. So we're, again, pretty close there. Let's go to the next game on the list, which is the Arizona Cardinals at the Philadelphia Eagles. I will start with the Eagles linebackers, I think. So I know last week we saw Nicholas Morrow and Zach Cunningham dealing with injuries. They both missed week 16. The Eagles were left with no choice but to allow basically more playing time for Shaquille Leonard, who played 87% of the defensive snaps. We also saw Ben Van Sumeren, I think that's how you say it, come in, play 58% of snaps at linebacker. Nobody's ever heard of him before. This is, it looks like Nicholas Morrow and Zach Cunningham were both at practice today in a limited fashion. So it's possible that at least one of them plays this week. So we shouldn't have to play Ben Van Sumeren in our championship week. But Shaquille Leonard, if only one of Cunningham or Morrow plays, could be one of those guys for deeper leagues, but I don't expect it to be anywhere near a full-time role. At best, it should be probably around 70%, which I don't even think they'd like him to play that much. So, if Morrow or Cunningham plays, they should be the every down players, and I think you could definitely start them. But you're hoping for one of those guys and not having to put Shaquille Leonard or, the other guy, Ben Van Sumeren, in there. Because as crazy as that is to say, right? You don't want to put Shaquille Leonard in your lineup if he's starting, which he just hasn't been good this year. And I don't think it's going to be a full-time role.
He looked so bad last weekend.
Yeah, it's rough, man. It's tough to watch, unfortunately, and it's just seeing more and more of him. It's no surprise that that the Colts let him go, but it is what it is, man. Football is a brutal physical game, and it definitely wears on these guys over time. So just not the same player that he once was. But yeah, other than that, for the Eagles, Hassan Reddick, again, coming off quieter week, what was a really nice matchup for him, just didn't take advantage of it. But he's been great all season. At really strong pass rush metrics. He's still a starting option for me. I think I have him as edge 11. Josh Sweat, in those deeper leagues, I think he's fine. He's good, but he's inconsistent. And then, other than that, I mean, the safeties are great, right? Like the safeties, Reed Blankenship, Kevin Byard have been really solid here. So I think you're fine starting those guys. But I don't know. Anybody else for Philly for you?
No, could talk about Carter for a brief moment. His snap share has fallen away. His production's fallen away. It's kind of a shame. But yeah, I don't think he's the kind of guy that anyone can be trusting to start at this point in the season. And yeah, just to touch on Josh Sweat as well. Real shame. He's fallen away as well over the second half of the season. He started pretty well in the first half there. And at one point I had him and Reddick ranked not too far apart. That gap has certainly widened as the season's gone on.
Yeah, I feel like I keep waiting for Josh Sweat to kind of get back at it and be more consistent again. But still 6.5 sacks on the year. Hasn't had a sack since week 9 after starting off pretty hot. Like I said, the 6.5 sacks all came from week 9 and prior. So just been quiet lately. But yeah, he's a good player. It's just again, just hasn't had the production that we've been looking for from him. So definitely not somebody that you have to start this week against the Cardinals, even though Kyler Murray does take his fair share of sacks as well. So there's that to like about it if you do start him.
Yeah, I think I cursed him. I started talking Sweat up a little bit around that week 7, week 8, week 9 mark, and I've just jinxed him from now on. So I'm gonna stay quiet on him next year because I do like him and I want him to come good. Good. So I'll leave him to it.
Would appreciate that. Yeah, try not to push Josh Sweat for no, I'm just joking. And then on the Arizona side of the defense, Chris Barnes was the full-time linebacker for Arizona in week 16. Josh Woods is out for the year. Obviously, we know Kaiser White's out for the year, so they're on to Chris Barnes here. Not the best matchup. The Eagles giving up the 22nd most tackles per game to the linebacker position. So you can start Chris Barnes if you're just looking for kind of a warm body, 100% snap player. But with all those options out there, he's like LB 33 for me. So definitely startable in deeper leagues, but not somebody that you're overly excited about, or at least I'm not anyways. I don't know. Do you feel any different about Chris Barnes this week?
I do not. No, he's ranked fairly lowly for me. I'm trying to have a look now. He's in that LB 40 range. I know that. LB 37 this week, actually, which is higher than I thought I had him ranked. But yeah, he's a full-time guy. It's just, at this point in the season, with third string linebacker, anyone can have a big game. They don't have to be great, especially at linebacker. They just have to play. But Barnes doesn't get me excited.
Yeah, unfortunately. I do like Budda Baker a lot. There's no surprise there. Budda Baker's been awesome. Still one of the most efficient tacklers at the safety position. I think he's top 10 again this year as far as tackle efficiency goes at 10.1%, I think it is, which is good for a safety. And it's a nice matchup going against the Eagles, who are giving up the 4th most tackles per game to the safety position. So Budda Baker is safety 3 for me this week. I really like his potential there, especially with just lacking options at the linebacker position. His ability to make tackles, I think, around the line of scrimmage should pay off nicely here against a Philadelphia team that can definitely sustain drives and get the ball moving. And they do like to run the ball when they have a lead as well, which they should. So, like this a lot for Budda Baker. But anybody else for Arizona for you?
It's a terrible matchup because the Eagles have only allowed 0.7 sacks per game over the last 3 games. They're leading the NFL in that category over that span. But Dennis Gardeck's got better as the season's gone on. Notice that Zaven Collins missed practice with an ankle injury. Gardeck just needs more snaps. and more pass rush snaps specifically.
Yeah.
But can he get them this week? Maybe with Collins out, but it's just it's a bad matchup. So if you've been avoiding him, continue to avoid him, but maybe keep an eye on him next year.
Yeah, it's definitely somebody that, again, like the Arizona defensive line, they need help. They're some of these guys are going to stick around and have a role here. And Dennis Gardeck is as good a bet as anybody else, right? I think he leads the team in sacks this season. I'd have to look, but 6 sacks. It leads the team. The next closest is BJ Ojolari, so with 4. And there's just been nothing here from the defensive line, unfortunately, in Arizona.
No, as I say, the underlying metrics, pass rush metrics, are pretty good. But if you look at the number of pass rush snaps he plays every week, it's in the teens, the mid-teens every week, which is not going to help him keep pace with the other guys. No,
unfortunately not. All right, let's keep her rolling here. Let's go to the Miami Dolphins at the Baltimore Ravens. Anybody that you want to start with on either side here?
Yeah, another stud from last week and all season in general, actually. AVG. Is he the real deal, John? Everything kind of suggests he is. But will the game script work in his favor or in the Dolphins' favor against one of the most informed teams in the NFL? I don't know. Will he get sufficient pass rush opportunities? Might be the same issue with Chubb, Sealer, and Wilkins this week.
Yeah, I love what Andrew Van Ginkel's done this season. Him and Bradley Chubb both. Zach Saylor and Christian Wilkins as well. Like, their defensive line's been really good. This is a tougher matchup, though, right? Against the Baltimore Ravens, one of the better pass blocking units in the league. And you got Lamar Jackson back there, who just always seems to be impossible to get a sack on. So slippery in the backfield, so quick to get out and get out of harm's way. And yeah, that's the struggle for me this week. Like, I like Van Ginkel. I like the playing time. I like the pass rush metrics. He's edge 22 for me this week. So he's definitely startable. And he's done a nice job when he's been on the field. But he's definitely on the lower range. There's matchups, obviously, that I prefer where I've had him a lot higher in the ranks. But coming off a 1.5 sack game, him and Bradley Chubb both. But not the ideal matchup this week, but there's enough volume there that if you've been playing him, you don't have better options, you could definitely continue to start him and Bradley Chubb.
Yeah, we're in sync. He's my edge 24 this week. Duke Riley, David Long. Are we trusting them this week? Both guys had 90% plus last week. We know we probably prefer Riley because he was the only full-time guy, 100% guy actually. But again, these are two names that don't get me massively excited, really, in what's going to be, again, a fairly good matchup for linebackers. But I struggle to get excited about guys like this.
I'm with you. And it's not, I mean, part of it's them, right? Like, as players, the entire Miami linebacker core this season just been super inefficient. Jerome Baker and Duke Riley specifically, those guys both have failed to crack even 10% tackle efficiency this season. But David Long, actually, he's the one that I like a little bit more, because the snap share has been comparable, at least for Long and Riley. But at least with Long, like, we've seen him be an average tackle, an average in tackle efficiency, whereas Baker, like, who's obviously not playing, but Duke Riley, just really, really inefficient with his opportunities, and by a pretty big margin here as far as comparing to league average goes. So, like, it's not, I'm not high on him by any means. I think I have him as like LB 42 or something like that. So because of the matchup more than anything against the Ravens, who are giving up the third most tackles per game to the linebacker position. So, like, again, in those deeper leagues, if you're looking for a guy that's going to play around 90% of snaps and have a nice matchup here, David Long is the guy that I like. Duke Riley, just not somebody that I want to mess around with. Again, barely, not even 10% tackle efficiency this season. I think it's close. It's like 9.8 or something like that. So if you round up, it is, but it's still, that's like 3 points below league average, right? And that's just not what you want from your linebackers, especially considering that inefficient tackling tends to be stickier than overly efficient tackling. So that's where I struggle with somebody like a Duke Riley.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And then the Dolphins safeties. So
Mhm.
we don't know whether Holland's going to come back. He's hopeful about playing. If he does, fire him up. If he doesn't, continue playing Brandon Jones in that spot. I prefer Jones and Holland over Elliott, but I would
Yeah.
start any of those three guys. Whoever's starting this weekend, I assume it's going to be Elliott and Holland, or Elliott and Jones. But yeah, go with those guys. Great matchup.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, Javon Holland, it looks like he's going to be back. So that is the nice thing. Or at least he's been practicing and he's trending in the right direction. So he's been out for a while. Looks like he'll be back this week. Deshaun Elliott did come back. So I tend to think it'll be Holland and Elliott, but I'm with you. If Holland's ruled out, Brandon Jones has been solid. I definitely prefer Brandon Jones over Deshaun Elliott as well.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, other than that,
Yeah,
anybody else?
no one else on Miami, but on the Baltimore side, is Roquan matchup proof? He's delivered in inferior matchups this year and of late. So San Francisco, the Chargers as well. So I'm again not fading him. There's probably two or three linebackers, and he's one of those two or three that I don't really move massively based on a poor matchup. They're always going to be in my top three until they prove otherwise. So yeah, I really like Roquan this week. And then Madubuike, he failed to record a sack last week for the first time in about 20 years. Could that cold streak continue this week in a tough matchup? I think it's possible.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a great matchup, right? And Tua, he's been getting sacked a little bit more lately, but the Miami pass blocking unit and Tua typically has been pretty good at getting the ball out quickly. So yeah, it wasn't a great matchup last week. We had kind of talked about it. It seemed to be in danger heading into last week against the 49ers. And unfortunately, the sack streak came to an end. 11 games, just tying the NFL record, unfortunately not breaking it. But yeah, Madubuike, he's been so good. It's hard to bench him. But yeah, there's definitely risk now, right? So we're not riding the hot hand anymore here as the streak comes to an end. But yeah, anybody else for Baltimore?
He's proved human. Yeah. Just a nod to monitor Kyle Hamilton's status with that knee. Would you pivot to Geno Stone? It's obviously not a like for like replacement. These are not the same player by any stretch. But yeah, I really like Hamilton. I know you do too. Good game last week with those big plays, but yeah, a bit worried about that knee.
Yeah, that's the concern, right? He was kind of dealing with the knee injury coming into that week, and then obviously didn't finish the game because of the knee injury. So that's the part that scares me. And man, he was so good. He's just been amazing. 2 interceptions in that game. He helped me get into one of my championship matches as well, with just that big performance on Monday night. So it's just, you'd love to see it from Kyle Hamilton. It's just such a bummer that he's dealing with this injury now, and we might not be able to use him this week, but I don't mind the pivot to Geno Stone. I'm not going to have him as highly ranked as I would Kyle Hamilton, and if Hamilton was playing, but Geno Stone's been fine this year. Marcus Williams, I'm probably not as interested in, but it's a nice matchup here for the Baltimore safeties, with Miami giving up the 6th most tackles to the position. So there is that to like if you do have to pivot and find somebody on the waiver wire. Geno Stone would be one of the higher options among safeties for me to look at.
Yeah. Okay. That about does it for me for the Dolphins and the Ravens.
I think that does it for me as well. So let's move to the Atlanta Falcons and the Chicago Bears. And this is one of the more like bland kind of matchups that I had here on the card this week, because there's really nothing like for me that I want to get into too much, because it's just not exciting, and it's not really anything different from what we've always talked about with these two teams essentially. Because yeah, TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds have been solid at linebacker, and it's a nice matchup for them. Going against the Falcons, who are giving up the 6th most tackles per game to the linebacker position. So like both of those guys definitely startable for me. Jaquan Brisker, one of the top safeties for me every week. Pretty much he's in that top 12 range on a pretty consistent basis, just because of his usage and alignment. And the same thing with Kyler Gordon and Tyreek Stevenson at corner. These guys have been excellent all year. Tyreek Stevenson getting a ton of targets thrown his way, and Kyler Gordon just been productive in that slot role and coming up with some big plays in there as well. And yeah, I mean, it basically comes down to the defensive line, where there's really only one guy. It's Montez Sweat. And I know he didn't get the big game last week, but he's been great over the past month now with Chicago. And he's definitely a starting option for me this week going against Atlanta. I got him as edge 12. Atlanta's also, given up a decent amount of tackles to the position, actually the most tackles per game to the defensive line position. But Sweat, it's not, Atlanta's a decent pass blocking unit, but going against Taylor Heineke and that quarterback, it's not a high end passing offense. So there's not a ton of opportunity there, but just looking at the matchups this week and some of the other options, it was hard for me to keep Sweat out of that top 12. I really liked what he's been doing lately.
Yeah, so I've got him down as my edge 17, but I'm going to move him up because ahead of coming on your show, I was just checking the latest injury reports, and it looks like the entire Falcons O-line is banged up. Like 4 out of the 5 guys are listed as questionable, and it looks like at least 2 of those are going to miss the game. So, like you said, Sweat was on fire for 4 games there prior to last week. I definitely think he could bounce back this weekend.
Nice, yeah. It's Storm Norton at right tackle over there for Atlanta, and we'll see how many of these guys actually play, like you said. But yeah, that's kind of the Bears for me. I don't know if there's anybody else on Chicago that you think is worth going into, but they're pretty easy defense to figure out for IDP.
No, like you say, that about covers it. The only thing I was going to mention on the Falcons side is that it continues to be Helms in place of Grant, which you probably touched on last week. And I wanted to mention that the Falcons seemed to find some semblance of a pass rush last weekend, which was really bizarre to see. I don't really want to trust any of those guys, though. Even Ebiketie. It's nice to see Zach Harrison sort of get in on the action as well. But yeah, I don't really want to trust any of these guys this week. Chicago's offensive line was pretty terrible to start the year, but I think there's better options this week. Yeah,
that's the thing. The Atlanta defensive line as a whole, they've been better than what they were, but it's just on a week-to-week basis trying to pick who is going to come up with a sack in there. It's been difficult to pin down, and like Bud Dupree's been fine this year, but he's really nothing special as a player. And you can definitely take the risk there because he's playing the most, but it's a risky proposition in the finals to be trusting somebody like a Bud Dupree. But yeah, other than that, for Atlanta, I mean, Nate Landman and Caden Ellis, we did see Nate Landman play 100% of snaps last week, which of course, this is another one of those fluctuating snap shares that we've seen all season long, where he does get a couple weeks where he plays an every down role, and then the next week he'll drop down to like 70%. So it's hard to trust him. He's like an LB3 for me just because he's been so efficient as a tackler. But I struggle to put him any higher than that. And the same thing with Caden Ellis. I know he had the sack last week, but he's been the opposite as far as tackle efficiency goes, just been really inefficient. So I wouldn't be having him any higher than an LB3 this week either.
Agreed.
So that will do it for that first half of games. So we'll take a quick ad break here. And this one is from our friends at DraftKings. NFL fans, it's time to unwrap nonstop football action this holiday season. Throw down on big matchups with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. This week, new customers can bet for just $5 on the NFL and score $150 instantly in bonus bets. So I do have a couple picks for Thursday night, and they are both on the Jets defense. I went with CJ Mosley over 7.5 total tackles, which is a really low number for a 100% snap linebacker already, but we talked about it earlier in the show. CJ Mosley, top 10 in linebacker tackle efficiency this season, playing the Browns, who are giving up the most tackles per game to the linebacker position. Really like the idea of CJ Mosley going over 7.5 total tackles. I think that's a great number for him to hit. And then the other one that I put was Quincy Williams over 4.5 solo tackles. Quincy Williams been another one that this year that, he's cooled a little bit, but he's been a great tackle machine, and he's playing a near every down role. And again, in the same matchup. So like these guys to have their opportunities this week and take advantage of those tackles. So yeah, download the DraftKings Sportsbook now with code PFF. New customers can bet $5 on the NFL action to score 150 instantly in bonus bets only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code PFF. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort. Licensee partner Golden Nugget Lake Charles, Louisiana. 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See sportsbook.draftkings.com/football terms for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. All right, let's go on to the second half of games here. It is the Tennessee Titans at the Houston Texans to get us started. Jace, where do you want to start with these two teams?
Yeah, Howard Landry. He started the year poorly. I've never been his biggest fan. He's always been one of those guys for me that relies on heavy volume to produce, but he has 9 sacks in the last 10 games, and Houston has allowed 4 sacks per game in their last 3. So I quite like the matchup. I like the form, and I like the matchup. So Landry is someone I'm looking to have a good game this weekend.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like Landry. Sorry. I don't know why I felt the need to speak there. Go ahead.
It's all good. It's all good. It's your show. You can talk whenever you want. The Al Shire show continues. He has at least 8 tackles in each of his last 5 and remains an LB1 in a good matchup. It's a pretty easy one there, really.
Yeah, he's been excellent. Love Azeez Al-Shaair is definitely in that LB1 range for me this week as well. And I vote for like the very deepest of IDP leagues. People want to hear a name that nobody's ever heard of. Otis Reese the fourth. He played a very small role as the team's secondary linebacker this past week because Jack Gibbons is on injured reserve now. He's probably only going to play around like 50% of the snaps again in week 17, which is a very untrustworthy number for IDP purposes. But there's a lot of deep leagues out there, and it's a decent matchup against the Texans. If people are desperate, which hopefully you're not, but if you are, Otis Reese the fourth could be somebody as well to look at on your waiver wire, because guaranteed he's on your waiver wire.
I love the name. And the last one for the Titans to mention, Amani Hooker is on IR. Obviously, Mike Brown played almost every down in his place. It's a desperation play at a position again where you've got lots of other choices, but you could do worse. Yep,
I am with you there as well.
And then on the Houston side, great matchup for the edge rushers. But we need to monitor the practice status of Greenard and Will Anderson. I'm even looking at Jerry Hughes and Derek Barnett as a sort of edge threes in a pinch because I like the matchup so much. So yeah, keep an eye on those guys. I'd prefer to have Greenard and Anderson in there, but if not, then those two others are still I think reasonably decent plays this week.
Yeah, it was a bummer to see Greenard because we've been talking him up the past few weeks, and he played only 3 defensive snaps last week with the ankle injury and didn't come back in the game. But if he's able to get healthy, this is a team that I think he had 2.5 sacks against just a couple weeks ago. So this is a really nice matchup, and they're offensive tackles there in Tennessee. Jalen Duncan and Dylan Radins have been terrible. So it's a really nice matchup, and maybe Will Anderson comes back as well to potentially take advantage of it.
And I think Dillard's back in the frame now because the rookie got injured, didn't he, last week? So, and Dillard was as poor as any left tackle in the league before he lost his job. So, they're really struggling to find, especially a left tackle. So, find any Texans edge rushers and start them is my advice. And then obviously to monitor Blake Cashman's injury status. Yeah. Obviously in his absence, we saw Harris and Perriman play every down last week, but it's not a great matchup for linebackers. So you could do better. Where have I got them ranked? Let's have a quick look. I've got Harris as my LB 29 and Perriman as my LB 35. How does that compare with yours, John?
Yeah, I got Perriman LB 34 and Christian Harris LB 35. So they're both in that kind of LB3, low end LB3 range for me this week. Like you said, the same reasons. Not a great matchup. It's not exactly 100% of snaps. There's the potential that Blake Cashman comes back as well. Like if Cashman comes back, I'm not playing any of the Houston linebackers. It's been too risky. We've seen them all, share like 60% snap shares. So it's just not worth the risk here.
Yeah, right there with you.
The other thing anything else for Houston for you before? Because I did have another point. So the other point here for Houston that I wanted to talk about was Jalen Pitre was benched in the second half of last game. He didn't play any defensive snaps beyond the third quarter. For me, that makes him extremely risky. I know this is a player, again, we've talked about in the past. People have spent high draft capital to acquire him this season. I'm not trusting him in week 17 lineups, not after a benching. I mean, it's definitely possible that, he starts the game again, but there's also now this risk that he doesn't play a full game and that D'Amico Ryans pulls him as well. And it's really just not a great matchup to trust it in the first place. Jalen Pitre hasn't been anything spectacular this season. And the Tennessee Titans given up the second fewest tackles per game to the safety position. So for me, that just tells me that Jalen Pitre is an absolute avoid this week in the championship matchup.
Oh yeah, right. He started slowly, found his feet for a little while there, but then sort of tailed off again, and ultimately, like you say, he got benched. And I think did I see they signed Kareem Jackson as well?
They did. They claimed Kareem Jackson off waivers.
That kind of shows to me that Pitre is he's losing his grip on that role. Last year, 13% tackle rate, 5 interceptions. This year, 8.9% tackle rate and 0 interceptions. Yeah. Which is confusing to me because I know there's a new DC there, but his role hasn't really changed. It hasn't really changed that much. He's blitzing a little bit more. He's playing in the slot a little bit more, but the difference is negligible.
Yeah, it's not a huge difference, right? And it's just like a really good example of the volatility of the defensive back and the safety position specifically here. Year to year, right? It's, you chasing these guys that have these big seasons is just not sustainable. So, unfortunately, Jalen Pitre, not somebody that I'll be starting in week 17 anywhere. Hopefully you don't as well if you have him. I mean, you could risk it if you like, but just know that there is now a big risk with him. I do like Desmond King, the cornerback for the Texans. He's been amazing. He's got 22 total tackles over his last 2 games. He's kind of locked into a starting role now as their primary slot corner, averaging 94% of the defensive snaps over the past 2 weeks. His efficiency has been obviously the key here. And it's just similar to what we saw from Tavier Thomas earlier in the season, right? When he had that role and was earning like a 13.6% tackle efficiency, which is insane for a cornerback. And then King has already surpassed that number, 15.6% tackle efficiency, which is bound to regress for IDP managers. And it's not the most amazing matchup by any means, but playing in that slot role still has really helped him. And we only need him to be efficient again for one more week here. So Desmond King, definitely a starting corner option for you if you need him this week.
Yeah, I like that. I did take a quick look at King for my rankings. I decided to go against. I can't remember the reason why. It might have been matchup based, but yeah, it's not a terrible matchup, is it? 23rd, Tennessee yielding 23rd most tackles to opposition cornerbacks. So maybe that's one I got to revisit. Might have convinced me there, John.
Okay, nice. Yeah, he's just been so good lately. I meant to get him in my rankings last week and just didn't do it and completely forgot. But I do want to see where Tennessee is in their last 3 games. They've actually been better recently. So I do remember pulling this number. So they're 23rd on the year at 11.9 tackles per game to the to the cornerback position. But over their last 3, that number is 14.3. So that would be technically like a top 10 number. But over the past 3 games, yeah, that's a top 10 number for cornerback tackles per game. So it's been a better matchup recently, at least for Tennessee.
Okay. That's a good point to take away there.
All right, let's go to the Las Vegas Raiders at the Indianapolis Colts. And I'll start with let's start with the Colts side of things, I think. And I'll start with their safety because Julian Blackmon has been excellent this season, really, really effective and efficient with his opportunities, playing that box role for Gus Bradley, but suffered a shoulder injury, placed on injured reserve. His season is now done. It's not a great matchup for the safety position. The Raiders giving up the 26 most tackles per game to safeties, but Nick Cross is somebody that, if you're looking for a potential streamer this week as somebody that can play that primary box safety role in Gus Bradley's defense, which is the same role that's allowed Julian Blackmon to be so productive and consistent as an IDP this year. I don't mind taking a shot on Nick Cross if you're desperate in a matchup here against the Raiders. He's not a top 24 safety for me or anything like that because of the matchup, but for deeper leagues, I may be in need of a potentially like solid tackle floor. I think Nick Cross could be an option this week.
Yeah, I'd listed to make mention of him, but 7 tackles in a game where he wasn't even the full-time guy, or at least not until Blackmon left. I'm not a massive Nick Cross fan,
sure,
but yeah, I can see why you'd mention him here.
Yeah, not necessarily a fan of the player, more just like the role that he would play in that defense this week in Gus Bradley's defense, right? So that would kind of being the main thing. But yeah, other than that, for Indianapolis, Zaire Franklin, EJ Speed have been excellent. Not a great matchup for them either. Going against the Raiders, 29th most tackles per game to the linebacker position. So I have them both in that kind of LB2 range. I actually moved Zaire Franklin. He's LB14 for me. He's one that has been LB top 12 for me all year long, but with EJ Speed there, we've seen a little bit more shared production from the linebacker core. So I have moved him down a little bit, but definitely he's not anywhere far from being a non-starter for me in IDP leagues or anything like that. So outside of him, not a lot of exciting options here. DeForest Buckner, Kenny Moore, obviously, but anybody that you trust outside of those guys?
Samson Ebukams, I've been kind of interested in at various points this year. He's I think probably the best edge rusher they've got there. I'm not a massive fan of Deo Odeyingbo. I think he's been quite lucky to have the sack numbers he's had, and I think Ebukams is probably the one guy I'd kind of like take another look at, but. Again, there's a lot better edge rushers available at this point in this season. I don't think the injuries have been quite as severe at the edge spot as they have at, say, the linebacker spot. So some of these guys that would be sort of edge 3s, edge 4s. This kind of pushes them down a little bit for me this week.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm in that same kind of range for pretty much all those guys across the board. And then on the Raiders side of things, Robert Spillane, definitely startable against Indianapolis here at a nice matchup, giving up the 5th most tackles per game to the linebacker position. So Robert Spillane definitely in that kind of LB2 to LB3 fringe for me. Nate Hobbs at cornerback has been, again, we talked about him last week and talked about how he had a couple weeks of lower production, but was in a great spot to bounce back against the Chiefs. And he definitely delivered 11 total tackles for him last week against Kansas City. So he's still, again, somebody that we're locking into lineups regardless of matchups. He's been excellent. But I think the bigger name to kind of mention here over the past 2 weeks has been Malcolm Kuntz, who had another massive IDP performance, 2nd straight week for him, 3 sacks this time around. He had 2 sacks the week before. I don't know that there's many IDP lineups that he actually helped last week. I don't know that a lot of people were trusting him after just 1 week, but now that he's got 2 weeks in a row, where are you at with Malcolm Kuntz? Is he starting anywhere for you if you have the option?
Yeah, I think so. I get loads wrong. We all do, right?
Yeah,
but Kuntz is one of the guys that, and it's too early to say. I'm not one of these people that's like, yeah, I got this right. But I was talking Kuntz up a couple of weeks back because he'd not just done it for one game. It was, I think, at that point there maybe 3 games that he'd had Maybe not the sack numbers necessarily, but the again that we talk about the underlying pass rush metrics were there. And as I said before, after one game, I'm kind of like, oh, that's a fluke. He's not done it before. After 2 games, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm starting to take interest now. And 3 games in, I'm like, right, there's a guy that I need to go and have a closer look at. Again, why? This is the case with quite a few guys we're talking about. Something happened in the NFL about a month ago. A lot of guys that were really productive started to drop off, and a couple of other guys like the Kobe Turners, like the Malcolm Kuntzes, just came from nowhere to look like some of the better players at the position, which is super weird. But yeah, that's why we love this game. That's why we love IDP. So I'm just rolling with it.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, if you're not starting him, it could be somebody that's interesting, at least as a stash, right? For dynasty leagues, showing that promise, like you said, in the underlying pass rush metrics, and obviously the production here over the past 2 weeks has been nice to see. I don't know that it's necessarily going to translate to next year, but it might not cost much to keep him on a roster and hold just to see what he turns into, because this is a Raiders defensive line that doesn't have many options outside of Max Crosby. So Tyree Wilson, obviously they spent the high draft pick on, but not somebody that I think they expected to play so many snaps this year or maybe even next year as a work in progress type player. So maybe Malcolm Kuntz has found his way into a starting role for next season. It's still a long ways to go from now till then, and there's definitely a lot of barriers that he has to avoid here with the draft and free agency and everything like that. But just a low, cheap little stash that we might be able to look at here in Malcolm Kuntz.
Oh yeah. And to put my Kuntz love into perspective, I've still got him ranked down as my DL 46 this week. So clearly, I don't believe in him as much as my argument suggested I might do.
Fair. Yeah, he's edge 40 for me this week as well. So it's like, how much do I trust it? I for me, like, I don't know. We see this a lot with guys too, where they have these back-to-back big games and then they disappear again. So I'm, cautiously optimistic, I guess, but he's not making starting lineups for me for the most part. Outside of really deep leagues, I think you could take a shot on him, but yeah, for the most part, not starting Malcolm Kuntz. Anybody else for Las Vegas Indy for you?
Nope, we've covered it all.
Awesome. Let's go to the New Orleans Saints at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Where do you want to start with these guys?
Yeah, it feels a shame to start on this point, but Demario Davis and Pete Werner, both LB3s for me. In fact, Werner, maybe even LB4 territory. At best, it's a below average matchup. Werner's been hugely disappointing all year, and Davis has only 4 games with 8 tackles or more this season. So, yeah, out on both guys this week and just in general, really.
Yeah, I'm with you. They're both outside the top 36 linebackers for me. Werner's like LB 59. Demario Davis is LB 38 just because he plays 100% of snaps, and you never know, maybe he sneaks in a sack in there, but it's super inefficient, this group. It's, again, one of those man-heavy defenses that just doesn't allow necessarily for elite tackle efficiency, and these guys have already been inefficient all season, so not trusting it.
Yeah. Next point, Granderson, Carl Granderson. I like what he's done this year. Or I kind of like what he's done this year, but he's got a tough matchup here against Wirfs and Gudica. I don't like this matchup for him. Wouldn't be surprised to see him have a quiet week.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. He's been solid. But yeah, Tristan Wirfs is one of the better, 6th in pass blocking grade this season with an 82.6. So yeah, really like Tristan Wirfs at left tackle there. And Carl Granderson has been definitely productive for IDP purposes, but again, probably outperforming his pass rush metric. 64.4 pass rush grade on the year isn't amazing by any means. So he's been solid in a volume heavy role, but I think you could start him. It's just, I think you temper expectations.
Yeah. And I was going to mention, and I'm going to anyway, Jordan Howden as the safety choice there, desperation play, but this matchup's terrible for safeties. So look in a different direction and go with someone else, is my advice.
Yep, I'm with you. Only other thing I think worthy of talking about was Cam Jordan. He had been limited in his playing time over the past couple of weeks with the injury, but got back to his regular starting snap share this past week, 70%, after kind of shaking that injury designation on the Wednesday of last week. And then as a result, Tano Passanio, who was highlighted in the Fool's Gold section last week in the IDP fantasy report, after his 3-sack game, he went back to being irrelevant for IDP purposes. I don't expect him to rear his head back into IDP circles again this season, with Cameron Jordan back to his snap share as well.
And then 3 interesting guys to talk about on the Bucks. Yaya Diaby has been some talk, some rumblings of sort of defensive rookie MVP. Is it justified? I don't think so. I think that's a stretch. 8 sacks is great, wonderful, in fact, but 22 pressures is not. He's got a tough matchup here. I'm not starting him or recommending anyone starts him anywhere.
Yeah, it's I think I'm his edge 38. So it's been nice to see. Again, like you said, he's now tied for the rookie lead in sacks with Kobe Turner. They both have 6.5 or 8, depending on if you count them on PFF ways. But yeah, it's just, again, not a great matchup. He's been great. It's still a rookie year, and I'm sure he could get better, but these are tough guys to start in the finals here. There are definitely better options out there. I'm with you.
His future is bright. I like the fact he's eating into Tryon Shiinka's role quite a bit as the season's gone on, but I just don't think this is his week. Devin White returned to a full-time role and had some big plays last week: a sack, interception, a pass breakup. Still the ultimate boom or bust player for me.
Yeah, I'm not trusting him. We've seen what he is all year long, right? Like, it was, I wasn't trusting him last week, and like, for people that did, it definitely paid off. But there was talk even leading into the week that it could be like a split role with KJ Britt, and it might not be a full-time role for him, but at least played the full-time role if you do have to start Devin White. But again, just even if you look at his tackle numbers from last week, his tackle efficiency was 7.9% in week 16, which is half of the league average on the year. So 9% on the season, a tackle efficiency for Devin White. He's just been so bad. I am not banking on big plays again from him. They really haven't been there outside of last week, and not expecting it to change this week against the Saints. So it's Levante David and as the only linebacker to trust for me for the most part.
Yep. And then Antoine Winfield, the DB1 safety, DB1 in IDP for us this year, just to keep an eye on that concussion. I couldn't see any news on that just before we came on. Maybe I missed it, but yeah, that would be a huge loss for those fantasy managers that were hoping that he could suit up for this weekend if he can't go.
Yeah, I have him as safety 1 right now as well, but obviously has the questionable tag, I believe. I don't see anything either. Doesn't look like he's on the injury report as far as, like, at least from the ESPN injury list goes. I know Carlton Davis also left last game with a concussion. He's on there, but I do not see Antoine Winfield. So could be safe. It could be safe for lineups this week, which will be nice. But that's the ESPN injury report. I'm sure there's probably a more accurate one out there. It's just the quickest one I could pull up. But good. Love Antoine Winfield.
Anything to add on the Tampa front, John?
On Tampa, no, I think that's pretty much it. That's it for me. And the same thing with New Orleans. Yeah, we covered it. So let's go to the San Francisco 49ers at the Washington Commanders. We'll start with the Washington linebacker situation, because these guys have been tackle monsters over the past couple of weeks. Specifically, Kaliki Hudson really been on fire since Jamin Davis landed on injured reserve. 28 total tackles over the past 2 weeks. And he also saw his snap share increase this past week as well to a much more reliable 92% in week 16. So if that's going to be the norm for him, which, again, we don't know, we're only going to have 1 week to be able to tell, it at least makes probably IDP managers feel more comfortable starting him, knowing that he was around that 90% snap range this past week, where it was like, I think it was 75 or 80% the week before that. So a little bit harder to trust, but super efficient with his opportunities. It's not the best matchup against the 49ers, who surprisingly only give up the 28th most tackles to the linebacker position. So he's like an LB3 for me this week, LB30 specifically. Cody Barton is LB29 just because we know that he's going to be in that full-time role. But it's hard to sit the hot hand at this point in Kaliki Hudson, and knowing that he has that efficiency with him, I think makes him definitely intriguing this week.
Yeah, I was going to go on to say that he's delivered big in a big way against two teams that should have been poor matchups. So that doesn't make it any more likely
Right.
he's going to be able to do the same for a third week in a row. But like you say, it's difficult to not ride that hot hand. So yeah, I'm in on Hudson.
Yeah, and then the other player that I love this week is Cameron Curl. He's been on a downward trend recently as far as just like production goes, but has had some really tough matchups in there, and that included last week against the Jets. I had him down outside of the top 12 last week. But again, the usage and everything hasn't really changed for Cameron Curl. The playing time is still there. So I love him this week going against the 49ers, who are giving up the most tackles per game to the safety position. So I'm definitely putting Cameron Curl back into my lineup. I'm not concerned about the lower production. We see this all the time from the safeties and defensive backs. It's just up and down. You got to play these guys based on matchups and bank on the usage and everything like that. And Cameron Curl's somebody that I'm definitely fine starting this week in a really great matchup.
Agreed. Kendall Fuller, though, one of the best corners in terms of tackle numbers this year. He's got a pretty, well, in fact, the worst matchup he could possibly have this weekend, which is a bit of a shame. So, unless Purdy plays like he did last weekend, and Fuller can find himself picking him off, then it doesn't look like it's going to be a good week for Fuller.
Yeah. Kendall Fuller and Benjamin St. Juste are outside of the top 24 corners for me. And they like you said, they've been solid. But it is, going against a team that have given up the fewest tackles per game to the cornerback position. So don't love that. And then Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, they've been fine starters in DT required leagues. I think you can continue to start them for the most part. Anybody else for Washington for you?
No.
Let's talk about the 49ers. There's not much to talk about. This is another one of those defenses that is pretty straightforward. Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, we start them. Nick Bosa, you start him. Javon Hargrave, DT required leagues, you start him. Outside of that, it gets a little trickier. I think Charvarius Ward and Diamador Lenore have been really solid corners this year, but you can play them based on matchup. And they were guys to avoid last week, but about an average matchup this week against the Commanders. So they could be starting options again in that low end kind of CB2 range. But the safeties I'm not as interested in this week. I liked Jair Brown last week. Didn't really do much with that opportunity in a strong matchup against the Ravens. So not somebody that I'm going to trust going against the Commanders here. So anybody else for the 49ers for you?
No one for this week. Missing Armstead, it's a real shame he got injured at that point in the season. He was on a bit of a tear, but again, he's been out for a couple of weeks now. So this is not new info.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the next game on the list. It is the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Seattle Seahawks. Where do you want to start with these two teams?
Yeah, question is TJ Watt the defensive MVP this year? I think he can kind of solidify that claim against should be Abraham Lucas. I've made notes here this weekend. So yeah, is he, John? What do you think?
Oh, defensive MVP for the NFL, like defensive player of the year. Oh God. I don't know. I don't think so. I just think Micah Parsons and Myles Garrett. I know they haven't had like the sack numbers that TJ Watt has. I know that, TJ Watt has these big splash plays, but I just think like as far as consistency goes, play to play, disrupting the quarterback, I just think Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons have been slightly better. Steelers fans are going to be so pissed hearing that. I know.
Totally put a target on your back here, haven't I?
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. They're not going to like this at all. But it's not like it's like a huge difference. Like I do think TJ Watt is close, but like luckily my vote doesn't matter. So it definitely seems possible that he should probably be the betting favorite here. I know he leads the NFL in sacks, so that's all that really matters as far as the voters are concerned. But yeah, I try to look at every play as opposed to 16 to 17 plays, but that's just me.
Yep. I struggle to rank Watt this week, but only in choosing whether he should be my edge 2 or edge 3. I eventually settle with him being my edge 2. Miles Jack leapfrogged Michael Walker in the race to replace the injured Landon Roberts. Obviously I had a pectoral injury, but it's a very poor matchup for linebackers, so I'm not getting too excited about Miles Jack. It's weird to see him in there again. Leave him out in lineups this week if you can. And Steelers decimated at both linebacker all year and now at safety as well. So whoever is healthy at safety will play this week. Hopefully it's going to be Minkah Fitzpatrick. Yeah, they just those two positions on that team have been ruined this year.
Yeah, if it's not Minkah Fitzpatrick, I don't know that we want to mess around with it and play like a Trenton Thompson or somebody like that. It's not worth playing around with this week. So yeah, safeties, forget about it. Same thing with the linebackers. Like you said, I'm not trusting Miles Jack. It's just been an endless parade of injuries there for the Steelers recently at the linebacker position. And then they also brought in Blake Martinez and Jalen Smith this week. And it's not like I expect those guys to play relevant snaps or anything like that. Like if you do have to pick a Steelers linebacker, if you're desperate, like sure, Miles Jack, but like he's definitely not somebody that I'm starting if I can avoid it. There's just too many safer linebacker options out there to trust this week.
Yeah. And then on the Seahawks, Bobby Wags continues to play like he's 10 years younger. I think you can continue to start him as a solid LB1, even in a middling matchup. Monitor Brooks though, because I think Pete Carroll had some. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he made it sound like Brooks was trending towards not playing this week.
Yeah, it doesn't seem likely, right? And I think, if you're looking for a pivot like Devin Bush, I don't think he's a great option, but, deep leagues, again, if you're desperate, it's not going to be a full-time role. It's not an amazing matchup. It's not a bad matchup, though. So there's at least potential there for Devin Bush in those really deep leagues as like an LB4 or 5, or depending on how deep your league is, could be LB3. But it doesn't seem like Jordan Brooks is going to be able to play.
It does not. Boye Mafe was among the sacks again after I think it was a 6-game drought. But he could be avoided this week. The Steelers haven't allowed nearly as many sacks as they were allowing earlier in the season of late. So yeah, I like Mafe. I like the jump that he's made this year, but not as keen on him this week as I have been in some of the easier matchups.
Yeah, it was, I think since week 10, he hadn't had a sack, and then he has the 2-sack game, and go figure, it's against the Tennessee Titans, right? Or was it Tennessee last week? Yeah, and they're terrible offensive tackles that we just talked about. But Broderick Jones is the right tackle. He should face 53.1 pass blocking grade, which is 70th of 85 offensive tackles. It's better than Dan Moore on the other side, right? But these guys aren't great. But Mason Rudolph, we'll see if he can continue to be okay, at least as far as avoiding sacks, which he was last week for the most part. So, there's, I don't know. I like Boye Mafe as a player, but it's not the most amazing matchup where he's a must start or anything like that.
Yep. And then a couple of low-line bits of info here. Reek Woolen is back to playing full-time again after effectively being benched the week before. Devin Witherspoon is still questionable. He was at my last check, so keep an eye on that. And then, Julian Love still there running the show in place of Jamal Adams.
Yeah, it seems like they were talking about shutting Jamal Adams down for the season. And I don't blame them. It just doesn't seem like he's been a part of the team this year, and obviously had that bit last week or the week before, I guess it was, where he just didn't show up at the stadium. He went home. So it doesn't seem like he'll play again this year. So Julian Love, nice little starting option for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it for this one, right?
Yeah,
Anybody
that's it.
else?
Nope,
Nice.
that's me done.
Awesome. Let's go to Chargers at Broncos. And let's start with the Chargers because last week, Derwin James didn't play a full-time role. Really kind of peculiar usage here in week 16. He worked as the team's primary nickel or slot corner, came off the field for a handful of snaps throughout the course of the game as well. I don't know if this is going to be his new role going forward or if it was something new that the coaching staff, without Brandon Staley, wanted to try out. But for me, at least, it's enough to push him down the rankings for the first time this season. He's still among the most efficient tacklers at the position. I know he's fifth among defensive backs in tackle efficiency at 11.7% among players that have played at least 50% of snaps. But the limited role last week is concerning. Going against the Broncos, 19th in tackles per game to the safety position. They've changed up their quarterback as well. It's not Russell Wilson. It's going to be Jarrett Stidham. So you don't know how good the offense is going to be. Derwin James outside of the top 15 IDP safeties for me this week, which I didn't think I would say. He's been locked in at safety 1 all season long, just because I don't want to move him out of there. But you got to be a little bit concerned here after last week's usage. Even though he did a nice job still coming up with tackles, no guarantee that that's going to be the case every week. And we don't know if he's going to continue to come off the field for that handful of snaps as well, which just provides a little bit more of a concern for the floor.
Yeah, I'm not overly concerned about his role. I can't imagine what defensive coordinator would think that it would be a good idea to only play Derwin James on 3/4 of the snaps in consecutive games. That would make zero sense whatsoever to me. I did drop him down to around about the DB 10 range, I think it was. And then I moved him back up again to the DB5 spot. I think when I saw that Russ Wilson was getting benched, typically the Broncos haven't been too friendly to opposition safeties, but I'm kind of hoping more than expecting that to change with Stidham back there. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm not overly concerned about James.
Yeah, not overly concerned like long term or anything like that. But I'm trying to think of it as like, if it was any other safety, not Derwin James, how would I treat this player that I was ranking inside the top 5, right? I would push them down. And yeah, maybe I overcompensated a bit here and dropped him down probably a little further than I'd like. And it's not like I'm necessarily benching him where I have him, because it's still hard to find a better starting option. So you really got to have some great options this week, or at least some really great matchups. But yeah, just a little bit annoyed by the usage last week. So I think that more than anything is what concerns me, and the fact that they could continue it here this week. But I don't imagine this is going to be a long-term thing for Derwin James at all.
No, you're right to drop him. You're right to drop him. It makes sense. We, like you say, and it's a good point. We do the same with any other player. We can't play favorites. Not when it comes to rankings. Not in championship week. Yeah,
that's the thing. If it was any other week, like I'd probably just leave it and say, don't worry about it, forget it. But yeah, it's championship week. I don't know. It also probably causes confusion for people too. So I apologize for that. But yeah, it's just a part of me that is a little bit concerned. But yeah, other than that, for the Chargers, Khalil Mack, really nice season that he's been having. Currently 4th in the NFL in sacks. I think he has 15. He's 13th at his position in pass rush grade as well. Hasn't recorded a sack in 3 straight games. It could potentially be a difficult matchup this week going against Garrett Bowles. Garrett Bowles, the left tackle there for Denver, 84.4 pass blocking grade is the 3rd best mark at his position. He's allowed just 2 sacks across 15 games this year. Like I said, Jarrett Stidham is at quarterback, so we don't know what that's going to look like, and that could help Khalil Mack's case. So he's not like crazy far down the rankings for me by any means. I think I have him as edge 13 this week, so just outside of that top 12. But just a matchup to kind of keep an eye on this week, going against Garrett Bowles, who's been really good at left tackle.
Yeah, I've got him ranked fairly similarly. Actually, I got him down as my edge 14.
Nice.
He does spend time on the other side as well, so
Yep,
he will face Mike McGlinchey, which is a much easier matchup.
that is better.
But yeah, it is a concern. 3-game stretch without a sack. This could be the week, though. I think that I'm not expecting fireworks in this game. I think it's going to be a fairly frustrating game, should we say, for those expecting a lot of offense. I think with those two quarterbacks, I think Stick kind of found a little bit of a rhythm last week at times, but yeah, I'm not expecting big things. I think I actually quite like the opportunity for the Broncos pass rushers in this game because Stick has been, in fact, the Chargers have allowed quite a lot of sacks in those last 3 games.
Yeah.
And yeah, with Stick under center, he's not nearly as good at evading pressure as Justin Herbert was. So yeah, the Brownings, the Jonathan Coopers and Zach Allens, I think they could have a good game this weekend.
Yeah, that's a good call on the Denver side of things. I don't mind those guys. The other thing too for Denver, as I change the slide here, PJ Locke, we talked about him last week, right? We were concerned about Kareem Jackson kind of coming back and playing a role on the defense enough that it keeps PJ Locke from being a starter, but they actually ended up releasing Kareem Jackson. We talked about that earlier. He was waived and picked up by Houston. But so for people that were paying attention to the transactions prior to setting lineups last week, you were still able to start PJ Locke for sure. And I think you just continue to start him because he's been excellent. He's delivered for IDP managers this season since he's been a starter. I have him as safety 11 this week. I know it's like kind of a neutral matchup here against the Los Angeles Chargers. But like you said, Easton Stick has been, he at least showed some promise last week against a very tough Buffalo team. So there's potential here that, he could maintain some drives, create some production for the opposing defenders. And I think PJ Locke is going to be one of the guys to kind of benefit from that, him and Alex Singleton. But still like PJ Locke.
Yeah, I moved him out, and then he's right back in there again in my top 20. I think he's safety 22 for me. So nice. Yeah, I like him. Maybe not quite as much as you do, but certainly one I'm looking to start this weekend.
Absolutely. And then like I said, Alex Singleton's LB9, Josie Jewell's in that kind of LB40 range. Nobody else really that we need to talk about that we've already kind of touched on. Let's go to the next game on the list, which is the Cincinnati Bengals at the Kansas City Chiefs. Where do you want to start with these two teams?
Yeah, I think this could be the week to avoid Dax Hill and Jordan Battle. I think they're going to need a big play to deliver in fantasy. It's not a good matchup for opposition safeties. I like both players, but I have moved both of them down this week.
Yeah, that's fair. Again, we talk about the safety position and, for the most part, a very matchup dependent position and alignment dependent. So there are definitely guys that we can move up and down quite a bit. And they tend to be pretty rangy as far as the rankings go. And Dax Hill's been somebody that, like you, I've moved up and down quite a bit this season. It just depended on matchup, and this isn't a great one here. So yeah, I'm still probably starting Dax Hill like in that safety 2 range, but only because he's been pretty solid for the most part. But Jordan Battle, I don't think you have to force him in there. And again, Nick Scott's still kind of sticking his nose in for a few snaps to just kind of, continue to remind us that he's still alive and not let Jordan Battle take full reins of the starting role. But other than that, I'm with you on the safeties.
He's just making a nuisance of himself at this point. Is Nick Scott? Just go.
He really is. It's embarrassing.
And the player I should probably have led with here actually is Trey Hendrickson. He's been on a tear this year. His season, when you look at his numbers, remind me very much of his season 2 years ago in 2021 when he finished with sort of 80 plus pressures and 20 sacks. Doesn't always get the credit he deserves, Hendrickson. I think maybe part of that is the fact that he manages to put up about 5 tackles every 3 seasons. So again, obviously I'm exaggerating, but yeah, he as a pass rusher has been fantastic this year. I think he's probably only got like 2 or 3 games without a sack. I'm frantically looking up the details to make sure I'm not talking nonsense. Yeah, 2 games without a sack this year, or at least half a sack. That's pretty incredible. Yeah, the Chiefs don't usually allow many sacks, though. That's the trouble. And they have given up 7 in the last 2 weeks, but they don't usually allow a lot of sacks. So
Mm-hmm.
this is, he's a great player, or has been a great player this year, but this could be a tricky matchup.
Yeah, that's the only thing is the matchup. But like you said, he's just been so good all year long. You just, again, we got one more week here to bank on the talent and his consistency and production. 16 sacks on the year is just really nice. We talked about him last week as well. And the matchup against, I think that was the matchup against Dan Moore as well, that he definitely took advantage of and delivered a sack. But other than that, anybody else for the Bengals for you?
Yeah, the two linebackers, Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt.
Yeah.
Wilson's been fairly steady, but they've got more assists than solos. I think in the last 5 games, it's weird. I need more solos from both guys.
Yeah.
That's where
it would be nice.
That's where the meat is. We need some big points, not these half tackle efforts.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you for sure. It is a nice matchup for the cornerbacks as well. So I really like it for Mike Hilton. I think in a great spot here to kind of produce some decent tackle numbers against the Chiefs, who have allowed 14.4 tackles per game to the cornerback position this year, which is 4th most. And we just talked about Nate Hobbs not too long ago, coming off that 11 tackle game, playing in the slot against these very same Chiefs. That is the Mike Hilton role. Doesn't necessarily play as many snaps as Nate Hobbs does, averaging 81% on the year as Mike Hilton, but been really solid this year and reliable for IDP purposes. And this is definitely a matchup for him to kind of take advantage of and be in IDP lineups this week. I have him as CB6. So I like Mike Hilton quite a bit. And then to the same point, I mean, guys like Chidobe Awuzie and DJ Turner, definitely options as well if you're looking for corner streaming against the Chiefs.
Good point. And then on the Chiefs, Nick Bolton is getting healthier, and his snap share is increasing just in time for this championship game. Since he has, they have been a better matchup for opposition linebackers since Jake Browning's been under center. So that's something that kind of makes me want to like Bolton more this week than I would otherwise.
Yeah, it's weird, right? We talked about it last week too, because Nate Markham, who is a Chiefs fan, was on, and I was asking him, what was the purpose of just sitting out Nick Bolton for just one entire defensive drive at the start of the second quarter? And they basically did it again this past week. Luckily, it wasn't as long of a drive as it was the week before, but it was only 5 defensive snaps. But they did it again where they sat him out for one drive early in the second quarter, and then just played 100% the rest of the way. So it's just like this weird thing that they're doing for whatever reason. I know he's coming off IR and stuff like that, but I mean, one drive, I don't think is going to make this huge difference. So if anything, it just, limits his potential for production on that one drive. But yeah, still fine starting Nick Bolton. He's just more of an LB2 for me going forward here.
Yeah, I think I got him in the same range. Looking at where I've got him ranked now, he is I've got him down as the as a low end LB2 as well. Yeah. So, but yeah, I like where he's trending, and I think, as I say, I kind of like the Bengals as a matchup for opposition linebackers a little more with Browning at quarterback than I did with Burrow. Chris Jones, I don't think gets the credit he deserves. Said the same about Hendrickson. Say the same with Jones. Certainly this year, anyway. He's a massively boom or bust type player because his tackle numbers are really poor compared to other defensive tackles, but those sack numbers, that pass rush upside is fantastic. 60 pressures and 12 sacks. It's really nice. The Bengals haven't been great at protecting the quarterback as well, so I quite like the matchup there.
Yeah, Chris Jones he's awesome. Still one of the best interior pass rushers in the NFL. And like you said, 8.5 sacks. I know he had a quieter little stretch there. I guess it was a 4-game stretch without a sack, but got another one last week. And like you said, it's a little bit of a better matchup here going against the Bengals. So I still trust Chris Jones in lineups. I'll be starting him again. Hoping to get another sack from him as well.
Yeah, and then my last point was just to monitor Jarius Sneed. He's not practicing today. I saw with a calf injury. I would be looking to start him in this matchup for sure. It's a nice matchup for opposition corners. So yeah, monitor Sneed and start McDuffie is my advice.
Yep, I am with you there as well. Those guys are definitely starters. Yeah, other than that, it's not like I'm in love with George Karlaftis this week by any means. So there's really not much else. Justin Reed. Yeah. Anybody else for you?
No. I'm also not in love with Karlaftis.
Right.
I kind of like a Menahu, but uh, yeah, not in a massive way. And I've been
Yeah.
I've been off on Mike Danner all year.
Yeah, and the playing time for those guys too being split is always the concern, right? It's not like a really kind of volume heavy role to rely on, so that makes it harder to trust. But I do like Omenahue as a pass rusher, but yeah, it's just not always the snaps being very reliable.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the last game of the week. It is the Green Bay Packers at the Minnesota Vikings, and it'll be on Sunday Night Football. There's no Monday Night Football game this week, I don't think, unless I read that wrong, which is definitely possible. It's happened before, but it doesn't look like there's a Monday night game just because I guess it's January 1st on Monday. I don't know. I don't know calendars too well. But let's start with the Minnesota Vikings. And unfortunately, Jordan Hicks, well, I say unfortunately, but I'm sure there's a lot of Jordan Hicks managers that were very happy to have him back. Jordan Hicks returned from injured reserve this past week and basically immediately stepped back into an every down role, to the point where, yeah, we're trusting him in IDP lineups again. I know it's not the greatest matchup here against the Packers. We're giving up the second fewest tackles per game to the linebacker position, but Hicks is the lone linebacker on this team, right? Really, the way that this defense is deployed, as much as we love Ivan Pace and everything that he's done while Jordan Hicks has been out, the snap share is not enough to be concerned for Jordan Hicks being the lone linebacker here. It's going to be around 30% for Ivan Pace or somewhere around there. So it should be enough for Jordan Hicks to be kind of that LB2, LB3 on the fringe of that range here in an every down role. But the other linebacker really here is Josh Metellus, the designated as a safety, but just kind of a do-it-all player. He's been excellent. I highlighted my love for him last week and ended up leading the team in tackles last week as well. And just continues to be somebody that I love to have in my IDP lineups, regardless of matchups. Cam Bynum's been excellent as well. So love those two guys for the Vikings. But yeah, Josh Metellus, special place in my heart for that ideal IDP alignments and production, basically is what I'm trying to say. He's been awesome.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I've got Bynum as my DB1 this week actually,
Nice.
and Metellus as my DB8.
Nice.
So right there with you.
Love it. Then the other piece of news out of Minnesota was that DJ Wanham suffered a torn quad muscle. He's been placed on injury reserve. He had 8 sacks on the year, been a really nice IDP fill-in option. Patrick Jones stepped in for DJ Wanham, and he had a decent game himself. He came up with a sack. He had a pass breakup, 6 tackles. Look, he's going to be a deep league option, really, if you really want to get risky, but leagues out there, if you're looking for a DJ Wanham replacement, Patrick Jones or Pat Jones the second, whatever his designation is on your website, could be somebody that could be reliable in a volume heavy role in the same way that DJ Wanham was.
Yeah, and that's the key point, right? They don't have to be very good when they're playing sort of 90% plus of the snaps every week, and that's exactly who Wanham has been all year. So if Jones can do anything close to what Wanham did, and Wanham's not a special player, then it could be a sneaky start for those teams in need of some defensive line help this weekend.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let's move on to the Green Bay Packers here, last team of the week. And I guess Devondre Campbell dealing with injuries. So once again, Isaiah McDuffie finds his way into the starting lineup. we'll see what happens with Campbell again this week. Obviously, we know by this point in the season, if he's not playing, we can trust Isaiah McDuffie in more of a part-time role. But Quay Walker going to be the lone every down linebacker there in Green Bay. The other part of it was at safety, Rudy Ford is battling an injury. So we saw Anthony Johnson play a full-time role this past week. He could be somebody, again, that deep leagues you're looking at, but it's not the best matchup there. Jair Alexander has been suspended by the team for one game. So Carrington Valentine, who had been irrelevant with Jair Alexander and Eric Stokes healthy in the lineup, but had been a decent IDP with those guys out, could be another streaming option this week against the Vikings, who are giving up the 8th most tackles per game to the cornerback position. And yeah, other than that, I mean, Rashawn Gary's edge 29 for me this week. Preston Smith is edge 33. Really tough matchup here against the Vikings offensive line, which has been the best in the league as far as pass blocking goes. And Rashawn Gary over the past few weeks hasn't been quite the player that we had hoped him to be. I did put the numbers somewhere, probably on a different sheet somewhere. I don't know. Oh, since Thanksgiving, when he had that 3-sack game, since then, he's had just a 51.8 pass rush grade and a half sack. So not great numbers there from Rashawn Gary over the past few weeks, which definitely has me concerned for him, and I'm not starting him against the Vikings.
Yeah, it was weird because he was playing better. He was more disruptive when he was kind of banged up at the start of the year and had a smaller role than he has been since he's been fully healthy. So that's kind of weird. I'm a little higher on Gary this week and quite a bit lower than you on Preston Smith. I'm not the biggest Preston Smith fan, but I'm wrong on him quite a lot. So in the weeks when I talk down, when I talk bad about him, he kind of produces, and in the weeks when I'm kind of like, okay, maybe he's still got a little bit left in the tank, he does nothing, absolutely nothing. So for the Preston Smith managers out there, I'm going to talk him down this week in the hopes that he has a massive week for you again. You need to thank him.
Yeah, this is kind of where I'm at with Preston Smith as well, and why I'm afraid to rank him too low is because whenever I do, he like last week where he had the 2 sacks or whatever it was, it's just like he just keeps coming back to bite me as well. So yeah, just he's solid veteran. He's had his weeks and could be a fine streamer in the right matchup, but not necessarily the right matchup this week against the Vikings. So
yeah,
I think that's gonna do it, Jace. That is gonna wrap up our final IDP preview of the season. I can't thank everybody enough for tuning in and listening and liking and subscribing to the YouTube channel as well, throwing the comments in there and the kind and the questions and all of that stuff throughout the year. You guys have been great, and I've been very happy to do this podcast on a weekly basis, get different IDP guests in as well, and highlight a lot of the great work being done in the world of IDP, so that hopefully you guys can find great work in the world of IDP as well, because I know it can be difficult to find it. It's not as widely as available as regular offense IDP, but again, we got a lot of great guys doing work, guys and gals doing work in the world of IDP, and Jace Abbey, definitely one of them. Jace, I can't thank you enough for coming on here in championship week and dropping knowledge and giving me 2 hours of your time, really, and coming on here for the second time this season as well. So really do appreciate it, my friend.
I've lost you, John. Sorry,
Oh, no.
the stream went briefly there. Did it go on your side as well?
Yeah, it did there for a second. I was just
Okay.
thanking you for coming on and being such an awesome guest as always, man. So thank you. Thanks again for doing this.
Hey, look, it's I'm honored to be on the final show, and to come on twice in one season is fantastic. Always fun mixing that up with you, John. So yeah, it's been my pleasure.
Absolutely, man. And I know we're going to do it again very soon. So people stay tuned to the IDPshow.com as well, where you can find Jason, his rank. Oh, I might have dropped out again. We're losing the stream. The stream is getting fed up with us. We're running long here. So Jace, quickly let the people know where they can find more of you and your work as well.
Okay, yeah, I've got some IDP rankings over at the idpshow.com. I have the weekly pod and YouTube show where I talk about some of the highlights and lowlights in those rankings. And I've got some dynasty rankings over at DLF with a weekly article talking about some of the moves that dynasty managers should continue on the IDP side of the ball.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely go check out Jace's work. And yeah, I'll be on the show. We're going to talk more IDP rankings over on the IDP show with Jace as well for this week 17. But again, thank you all very much for listening. Good luck in the final week, the championship week. Hopefully you bring home the trophy and make this entire season worth it. And let us know if you did. But again, thank you all very much. And until next time, peace out.